Hello, and welcome to Hey Boomer, the show for those of us who believe that we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. Today, we're going to talk about reinventing ourselves, what it takes, what it means, why we do it. And it got me thinking about some of the reinventions that I have been through in my lifetime. And there have been many. But I started to think about when I was in my early 50s and I had just sold my business, Kids Art, and I had gone back into corporate America working as a director of training. But I knew that's not where I wanted to be for the long haul. So I started working with a coach to figure out what is it that I really want to do, what's going to be meaningful in my life. And after we worked together for probably a couple of months, she said to me one day, you'd be a really good coach. And it was like this light bulb moment. I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to be a coach. And then I realized, as a young person, first year in college, I wanted to study sociology. I wanted to be a social worker, but I had to put that on the back burner for various reasons. So that's one of the things that seems to happen in this next act of life is that we start to tap into things that we may have dreamed about when we were young, and then we put aside for various reasons. And so looking back into your life, into your history of what was important to you when you were young, may be a good place to start when you start thinking about reinvention. And sometimes talking with people, even getting help from a coach, can be helpful in that process. So today, my guest is another Wendy. Her name is Wendy Battles. And by day, Wendy is a cybersecurity awareness expert at Yale University. But by night, and I venture to say on weekends, Wendy pursues her passion for celebrating, illuminating, and elevating older women. As the host of the Reinvention Rebels podcast, Wendy interviews bold and unapologetic women 50 to 90 years old who have reinvented themselves later in life to see new possibilities. In this way, Wendy shines a light on the notion that we can reinvent ourselves at any age or any stage, and she's helping to disrupt the limiting beliefs about the value of aging women. At 57, Wendy is a reinvention rebel herself, having reinvented herself many times during her life, including as a management consultant, a voice actor, a health coach, and now in her most recent reinvention as a cybersecurity awareness expert and a podcast host. And she says that the podcast hosting is by far the most rewarding reinvention she has come across yet. Along her journey of greater self-awareness, she's learned the art of living on purpose and embracing life with more joy, ease, and trust. So you are going to love Wendy. You are in for a high energy conversation. But before I bring her on, I want to mention our sponsor, Rhodes Scholar. Rhodes Scholar is the not-for-profit leader in adventure and educational travel for boomers and beyond, offering expert-led adventures in all 50 states and over 100 countries. I love learning with Rhodes Scholar. I've been on several of their trips, both as a solo traveler and with my grandchildren. And I am inviting you all to join me in Costa Rica this summer, June 2nd through the 10th. I'm doing a private trip with Rhodes Scholar, and it's going to be amazing. So if you're interested in that, drop me an email. My email address is wendy@heyboomer.biz, and I will send you all the information. After that, I need to bring on and want to bring on my friend, Wendy Battles. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. It's so weird to say that, but I'm so excited to be here with you today.
And, we were just talking before we came on. It was such a joy. Wendy and I met through a women's podcasting group, and just been a joy to know her and share her delight and energy with what she's doing. But let's start with reinvention. I mean, you've reinvented yourself several times. And so, what have you been looking for with each one of those reinventions?
That's a great question, Wendy. And I have to say that probably different things in each reinvention. I think when I was in my 30s, I reinvented myself as a consultant. So I was looking for new experiences and learning new skills and trying things out, which was great. I reinvented myself as a voice actor. And that was really because people kept saying, Wendy, you have a great voice. You should do something with it. And I didn't even know what I was getting myself into, to be honest with you, which is sometimes what happens. I think when we reinvent ourselves, we might have this idea of it, and then there's sort of the reality of it. And for me, that was getting out of my comfort zone. That reinvention was about getting out of my comfort zone, building trust in myself that I could do something I'd never done before, learning new skills. And also, I think it was the ability to work with different people, because as a voice actor, you work with a lot of different producers. They have very different styles and expectations. So it taught me a lot about flexing my style. In my 40s, I reinvented myself as a health coach. I had a corporate career. I'm not really a corporate person. And I was really searching. And that was a great opportunity for me to figure out how to be an entrepreneur. And honestly, I wasn't that good at it. I really wasn't. And I became a coach, but then I realized I don't love coaching. So it was a lot of self discovery in that reinvention about both what I liked and what I didn't like. And I think it's interesting because I think the things we do give us breadcrumbs and often hints about something bigger, even though when it's happening, we can't always put all those puzzle pieces together. But they really were all leading up to my current reinvention as a podcast host, just like you, of the Reinvention Rebels podcast, because it really encompasses my voice acting work and my all the years I've spent public speaking. This idea of being in conversation with people. I love talking and listening to people. I love their stories. And I think it's very interesting that I was able to integrate in a very synergistic way many different skills gathered over time. And I will just add that in my 30s and my 40s, I was always seeking, like, what am I meant to do? And I would try something, but ultimately it wasn't it. And it took me until 54 to really feel like I'm truly living on purpose. And that's what's really different about this most recent reinvention. That's why I think of it as my best reinvention yet.
So I love how you tied it together, because when I was looking at some of your different reinventions, I was like, where is the thread? But I love how you tied it together. And your comment about finding yourself, finding your purpose or whatever at 54, in all the interviews that you've done, do you feel like that's common, that we find our purpose later in life, or do you think that's not as common?
I think it's pretty common for a lot of people to find their purpose later in life. And for some of us, we have multiple purposes. It could have been that when we were younger, our main purpose was raising healthy, productive kids. And that's like a pretty important purpose. But I think that as people age, their priorities and values can change. So I certainly think that we can change our focus, or perhaps we have a new purpose, something new emerges that we couldn't even see before. So I think it's a mix, because I also know people who from the 20s have been so clear on their purpose. That was never me. I couldn't even decide what to major in college. I changed 8 times. I ended up with sociology like you, but I could not figure out, like, what can I major in? I'm a multi-passionate person. And right, for me,
that's
right?
wonderful.
Yeah. So I think it's been for me this journey, and I certainly see other women, especially that I meet, that are on a similar journey, that are searching, that are looking for that greater purpose. And I do think that when we get to midlife and older, we tend to have more time and space. We have more opportunity to focus on ourselves as opposed to more outwardly focusing on our job, our family, what have you. So I think it creates greater opportunity if you haven't figured it out to say, I want to make me a priority right now. I want to focus on what I want to do and see what we might uncover in that process.
Love that. And Wendy, I want to talk a little bit more about purpose, okay? Because some people think, I have no idea. I mean, what purpose is so big, right? Like if I'm not solving world hunger, then I don't have a purpose. And I want to find out from you what you mean when you say you're living on purpose.
That is a great question. And for me, living on purpose means living with joy, getting up every day and doing something that is so inspiring to me that I'm willing to make sacrifices to do it. And by that, I mean, I get up every day, since I do have a full-time job, I get up every day at 4:45 promptly, and I cannot wait to get to work on the podcast. So something to me and it's the kind of thing that I would do. For me, that purpose means I would do without getting paid. Like I love it so, not that it wouldn't be a nice thing to get paid to do it. I wanted to say that. But I feel so inspired to do this. I feel like this is what I'm called to do. I feel like I finally stepped into the light and I'm doing something that's what I came here to do. Where the other things I've done in the past, for example, even as a health coach, like I enjoyed it to some extent. But I quit my job to do that. And then I was like, oh, this is really kind of hard and I don't really love it. But I didn't want to admit that I didn't really love it because now I quit my job and I didn't want to seem like I'd failed. So I didn't have that kind of thing where this time I have this knowing. This is how I know it's my purpose. I have a knowing about it. And the way that I got to this purpose, Wendy, is that I had been asked to be on a panel at Yale University for one of our affinity groups, the future leaders of Yale. And they had asked me to be on this panel about personal branding.
Okay.
I thought, well, what do I know about personal branding? I used to have a business. I used to do that. I was kind of, boning up on it. And I started listening to a podcast called Package Your Genius, which I love the title of it alone, right? This idea that there is something that each of us shines at.
Right.
Sometimes it's a matter of uncovering what that thing is. But I got so enthralled with this podcast. I listened to like all these episodes. Then I bought her book. She had a workbook. And I started answering the questions. What do you love to do? What have you always loved to do? What gives you energy? What don't you like to do? What would you do if no one paid you? I started like really thinking about these questions and the answers. And I think the key for me about that process is that I got really quiet. I started
Great point.
Just cook in silence, clean in silence, just really being more with myself. So this path of self-discovery. And it was in that getting quiet that one day I was meditating and I heard Reinvention Rebels. I was like, what? Reinvention Rebels. Like this tiny little voice inside bubbled up and something told me, Wendy, you better write that down. Because sometimes you get ideas and you're like, oh, I'm going to remember that in the morning. And you wake up in the morning, you're like, I don't know what it was.
Right.
So that for me was the start. And I think that's what's different too about for me living on purpose is that this really came from within. This was listening to my inner wisdom to help guide me. And it just sparked something in me that was like, yes, that is it. That is me doing this. And it has just been fantastic. I love it. So living on purpose.
Yes, what a beautiful explanation. And I can totally agree with everything that you said there. And that, I do most of this for free because I love it. I feel like the work that you and I are doing, Wendy, really helps a lot of people find that life is not over at 55 or 65. Yes. We can still live full, meaningful lives and reinvent ourselves. And, in my beginning story, I talked about when we were young, what we left behind. Neither one of us could have thought about podcasting when we were young, right? But we had this idea of being helpful.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I will tell you that, yes, I think that is one of the keys for me because I've spent a lot of my time over the course of even as a teenager, volunteering. I remember my first volunteer job was a candy striper at our local hospital. And, I've always been very involved in whatever community I lived in, volunteering, whether it's direct service, we had a soup kitchen, or being on a nonprofit board. But I come from a family where there's a legacy of service and giving back. And I really feel like what we are doing, to your point, is being of service to other people. And I think that's one of the reasons why this feels very fulfilling to me, that it's bigger than just me. It's really, to your point, helping other people see what's possible. And
Right.
I feel like you and I are testimony to the idea that anything is possible. We can do and be anything we want to be.
I agree. So a couple of comments have come in. Somebody says to you, don't forget Kumba Collective. You want to speak to that?
That's my friend Denise. Hey, Denise. I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit, even though I'll say I haven't always known what I was doing, but I have great creative ideas. And Denise and another friend, a mutual friend, and I got together with this idea because we're all creative souls. And we started this company where we would make these, we would do a lot of crafting and make these things. And I made jewelry, and Denise is an amazing milliner, and she made the most beautiful hats. And Kathy made beautiful textiles, and we would work collectively doing this. So I think in so many different ways we can express our creativity. And even if things don't work out, I feel like even when things don't work out the way we want them to, and it can feel very disappointing, that it's not for nothing, that all those experiences are helping us get to that next thing, or ultimately where we're supposed to be. Because from Kumba Collective, from being a health coach, from doing IT consulting, independently, I learned a lot about marketing and how to show up. And all of those things have really helped me with this endeavor. And the other thing I noticed is in the past, I've given up really easily on things. Like I thought, well, how hard can this be? Well, things are more difficult often than we think. And then I would kind of give up. Like when I started voice acting, I thought, oh God, this is so hard. It's hard to find work, but it's like being an actor. You got to keep at it. Right. You got to be persistent. So all of those things have served me so well, because this is something that I'm going to do like forever. So I now have that much broader perspective in this endeavor to know I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep going. It takes a while to build your audience and to grow something. It doesn't happen overnight, at least not for most people. And that you have to just keep at it. So those are all incredibly important things I've learned from these other reinventions, even if they didn't pan out the way I hoped they would.
Yeah. And that there's another comment here that really reiterates that. He says, Steve says, there's a lot of pressure to find our path early, but for so many, it takes longer. The discovery journey can be exciting. And it's so true. So you mentioned creativity, and I'm wondering, as the podcast host, right? So you and I interview people. Where do you get to express your creativity during Reinvention Rebels?
In a lot of different ways. One, in talking to people and being in conversation and asking them interesting questions. A lot of what I do outside of the interview, the actual production of the podcast, is writing. I write a lot. I love writing. And one thing I was thinking about recently is that growing up, I was terrible at athletics. My whole family, like, were more intellectual people than athletic people. Like, my dad was the manager of his high school basketball team, and I, in turn, was the manager of my high school track team. Like, I just had no athletic ability whatsoever. However, one of the things I uncovered, though, when I was in middle school, is that I was a really good writer. And that continued in high school, when I was really good at expository writing, not creative writing, not writing, short stories, but writing research papers, doing research. So my creativity was expressed in that way. And my love of writing has continued throughout my life and everything I've done. I've done a lot of writing, and I've always been really good at writing. So one of the things that I do in this role that's very creative is a lot of writing, from writing writing posts on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. And I think because I'm open to ideas coming to me, again, being quiet and more still, ideas come to me. So I'm able to take that little kernel that shows up as, oh, this would be a great Instagram reel. And then I just have fun also being creative, like even making videos. I have a lot of fun just making videos, sometimes 15 seconds, sometimes a minute, but kind of being in the space of being playful with what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a way to express our creativity because I know that sometimes I take myself like way too seriously. So I'm having fun just seeing what unfolds and also thinking, well, some things work and some things don't. Like part of being creative is you're testing out things.
Right.
What things
Right.
work, what resonates with people, what doesn't. So I'm having fun kind of playing with that, with the graphics. So I think in a lot of different ways, I'm able to express my creativity in doing this,
Yeah.
and it makes it really a lot of fun.
It does make it a lot of fun. So I have to ask you this, Wendy. Sometimes I have found in my recreations, my reinventions, um, some people have been a little bit skeptical. Like, really? You're going to do that now? Maybe that's not the best way to go. I'm wondering, and I should say the other side. I mean, so other side people have been like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, you should go for it. So I'm wondering if you, in your reinventions, have had a champion, or if you've had naysayers, and how you approach that.
I approach it by having as many people around me that are my champions. For example, my friend Denise that is watching right now. We're each other's champions. We are each other's cheerleaders. We remind each other that we can do this because something that's very similar is we're both multi-passionate people with lots of different interests. And I certainly have heard people say before, wow, you really have your hands in many different things, don't you? Kind of thing. The kind of thing that it's not necessarily like an overt criticism, but the kind of curiosity that's like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And it's true.
Right.
I have an interest in so many different things. So I would say that there have been some people that have been skeptical in the past, or the kind of thing like, well, do you really think that's a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
Have you really thought carefully about that, Wendy?
Right.
Right? That kind of thing, which I think, I know we've talked about that we both have heard some of that in the past. But I think when we're living in the space of possibility and when we can find our allies, our champions, our supporters, and really surround ourselves with people that are our team Wendy or team Denise or team Steve, and it could even be having like a little mini board of directors, so to speak, for our dream, whatever that thing is, the people that can help you, that are totally supportive, but also can give you helpful advice or coach you or help you see things that maybe you can't see because you've got blinders on. So I think those supporters can also help us in many different ways, not just cheering us on, but sometimes being our reality check. Because I have all
Yeah.
kinds of great ideas. It doesn't mean I can make them all happen. And so sometimes I need people to like rein me in a bit too, which I think is also helpful. So truth tellers are also helpful, but in a positive way.
Right, right. And, to go back to your comments about purpose, I think when I started the podcast and I was having concerned family members say, well, can you make money at that? And is that really the right thing to be doing? I think the fact that I knew this was absolutely what I wanted and needed to be doing, it it I was easily able to say, yeah, this is exactly what I need to be doing. And I appreciate your concern, but this is what I'm doing. It gave me that courage, that strength.
Yes. I
Yes.
love it. I love it. And I think when we're rooted in that belief, that self belief that this is it, and even though I don't know the how yet, I know the why. I know why I'm doing this, and I trust the how will unfold. I think that when we're in that space and we have that belief, it's easier to hear what people have to say and to your point, let it roll off us and not have to get defensive about it. Well, I'm doing this because whatever. It's just like, well, thank you for that. And
Hmm.
I just know this is what I'm meant to do right now. So it can
Right.
be right that simple acknowledgement of what they've said. And then we just continue on doing what we're meant to do.
Yeah. So from all the women that you have interviewed, Wendy, Is there a common theme, a common action or common belief that has carried people through their reinvention journey?
There are a couple. If I had to boil it down, I would say first, curiosity. There is a common thread among everybody that I have interviewed that they are curious souls. They are interested in themselves, in the world around them, in continuing to develop. So they're willing to ask themselves questions. They're willing to try something new. They are willing to ask people for help.
Big
Sometimes I
one.
think, right, we have to do it. We feel like we have to do it all ourselves, but they're willing to have what I call a reinvention dream team. People that are,
Love
we're
that.
talking about, right? Those supporters. So that's one, curiosity. The second one is courage. There is this theme among women that reinvent themselves that they are courageous. And courage shows up in so many different ways for each of us. It could be small courage. It could be courage with a capital C, right? There's the courage by choice, what I call courage by choice, when we want to do something new, for example, and we're willing to put ourselves out there. And then there's that, courage when you're forced into something, or you are faced with dealing with something that you necessarily didn't want to necessarily do, but you find the courage to address it. So either way, they have courage. And as one of my rebels says, do it scared. Just
Do it scared.
do it. But right, we have to just kind of, feel that fear and just move through it. Even if it means taking baby steps. Maybe it doesn't mean leaping off that cliff, but maybe it means just inching up and building your confidence. And as you have a little victory, then it emboldens you to think, well, I could take the next step on my path to doing
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
curiosity and courage are two really big themes I see throughout. The one other thing I'd say is self-permission.
Ah,
I think for women especially, we put so much pressure on ourselves. There's so many expectations for us to do it all, which of course is totally impossible. But we don't always give ourselves permission to nurture ourselves, to create the space to grow. And these women have said, my dreams matter.
mm,
And I want to pursue that. So they really are giving themselves permission to go after whatever that thing is.
yeah, I love that. So tell me what you have learned about yourself by doing this podcast.
I've learned so much. I've learned so many different things.
Uh-huh.
I've learned that when I really want to do something, I can make it happen. That when I have decided that this is it, I'm willing to put in the time and effort, meaning I'm willing to get up at 4:45 every weekday to work on this podcast. So I've learned a lot about that. I've learned a lot about being much more organized about it, because there are a lot of moving parts to producing a podcast, and it's not just the production, but it's the promotion. It's
It's the research.
it's the research. It's building basically a business. So
Yep.
all of the things that go into that. So I learned that I'm a pretty capable person. And I learned too that sometimes you're using new technology. So I realized, well, I can
Mhm.
learn new things, and it things don't have to be as hard as I think they do.
Mm,
And that's been a really important lesson. I've also learned that it's okay to let go. Some days I have these ideas of all these things I want to do, but it's not even realistic, because I have, I have a limited period of time. And
right.
so I've learned to let go of, not everything has to be perfect, that you need to get started to move forward. Because in the past, I've been very stuck on doing everything perfectly. And between doing everything perfectly and being a people pleaser, those have been things that I think have been my Achilles heel. And I've been
Mhm.
able to really overcome that with healthier boundaries, both for myself and other people, and letting go of this idea that everything has to be so perfect.
Right.
And I will tell you, I think about that as I was listening back to some of my first episodes when I got started over 2 years ago. And I was thinking, well, the sound quality wasn't that great, even though I had like a decent microphone. I didn't even know how to set the volume, the settings for it properly. And so,
Right.
Wendy, I listened back, I was thinking, wow, the sound was so-so. It wasn't terrible, but now it's so much more professional. And I see how I've grown just in my work as a podcaster.
Mhm.
And that has been fantastic to see, to reflect back on that and see I've come so far. I've really come
Yeah,
so far. So that's been encouraging for me, to be honest.
I know. And that's a wonderful thing as an older adult to recognize that you can learn all these new things, not just skills, but about yourself, about your abilities, about it's okay to not be perfect. I mean, all of those things I think are so energizing. I mean, like I was telling everybody about this show, the energy that you bring it's phenomenal. It's contagious. I love it.
Thank
I want to
you.
be that. Wendy Battles defines energy.
I love it. Thank you. What can I say? What can I say? But you're right. There is so much learning as we age. And I think there's so much more freedom too. Where often when we're younger, at least when I was younger, I was so set on doing things a certain way. And one of the things I've learned is that there are many different ways to get to your goal.
Mhm.
It's not always a straight line. And sometimes it is circuitous. Sometimes you run into obstacles. But I've also found, Wendy, that those obstacles or detours are always for a reason.
Mm.
And they always support me in the outcome being often better than what I might have even envisioned. So instead of thinking, oh, I can't believe this, I really try to embrace, oh, well, there's new possibilities here.
You have spoken about that before. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to embrace those things when
Totally.
things happen out of your control. So we have Ernest has asked a question, and he says, what advice do you have for not just young people, but for all people wanting to take an example from you on your Reinvention Rebel ride?
That's a great question, Ernest.
Yeah.
And I would say, one, don't be afraid to try because we never know what's going to happen unless we're willing to put ourselves out there in whatever way you're doing that. So I think making the attempt and trying, number one. And number two, seeing failures as opportunities. I've had so many disappointments about things I've done. There are things that have worked out really well, but there's things that haven't when it comes to like my reinventions. And of course, in the moment, I was like, I can't believe this. It was disappointing. Sometimes it felt crushing because if you put your heart and soul into something, it doesn't work out. It's it's really, it can do a number on us. But
Mhm.
I think wisdom is taught me that, and I wish I could have learned this earlier when I was younger, that failures are opportunities for us to grow, and they're often what we need to learn. Just like people come into our lives sometimes, and sometimes you have a difficult person in your life, and you're like, "Ugh, why is this person in my life? Why?" But
Right.
whether it's a friend or a boss or a significant other, whoever that person is, but I always think those I learned the best lessons from the most difficult situations. Not that there aren't lessons I learned from when things go smoothly, because I can learn lessons from that too, but the most impactful lessons for me come from the challenge, the difficulty, overcoming something, because it always builds my confidence. It always reminds me then, wow, I can do this. I can use that to look back and say, well, if I could overcome that situation, now I have a lot more wisdom and experience. I should be able to overcome anything. So I think those things to me are helpful, is to really try and to embrace failures or even just disappointments when something doesn't go quite the way we want to. Thinking, well, how could I do it better next time? How could I learn from this experience and use it to grow instead of, as I know we can all do, beat ourselves up over it? I mean, I've spent a lot of time, I'm not gonna lie, beating myself up over things. But I feel like, Wendy, those days are less and less. And the older I get, the more I can have more better perspective to realize the world's not going to end. I can get through this. And most things, quite honestly, aren't as bad as I make them out to be in my head.
Well, and you use good language. You don't call things like failures and disappointments. You reframe them into opportunities, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And to be empathetic with ourselves. right?
Yes.
We would
Yes.
never speak to a friend in critical terms of the way we sometimes might speak to ourselves.
It's so
So,
true.
yeah,
We're our own worst critics. No one talks to me the way I talk to myself. Nobody, my boss, my friends, my husband, nobody talks to me in the way that I sometimes catch myself
catch yourself.
talking to myself like, what were you thinking? This is crazy. That was a terrible job. I mean, nobody else says that. So, yeah, giving ourselves grace, I think,
Yeah,
is one of the most important things that we can do.
I do too. Steve, that's great. He says he prefers the term second opportunities over second chances.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, I do too. That's a
I
good one.
love, and I can think of my podcasting as a second opportunity after my voiceovers.
Yes, you
That's like a
can.
great way for me to reframe that, Steve. I love that because that really is what it is. Like I couldn't figure out how to make that work. And interestingly, even a few years ago, I was going to try to start my voiceover career again. And I just wasn't feeling it. Like I made a new demo tape and I just thought I don't feel inspired to just make ads for people.
Right.
Do that kind of thing. That wasn't my thing, but this taking those skills and applying that to something that I can be of service to other people, like now that is it, right? So second opportunity. Thank you,
Is it?
Steve.
I know. I love that, Steve. Thank you. All right. So I am wondering if there's any last things you want to leave us with, because this has been amazing.
This has been awesome and I've loved it. And the thing I will say is that if you listen to the Reinvention Rebels podcast, if you're all thinking, I want to think about second opportunities, I want to create something new, one of the things that you will get from listening to these stories is a little bit of the how of how people did this. But really what you're getting is inspiration to light your path. It's hearing stories to remind you, if Wendy can do this, if Mary, who started running at 55 and at 72 is running in marathons around the world, can do this, well, I can have my own version of second opportunities in my own way. I just have to figure out what that is. So the possibility lives within all of us to create those second opportunities or first opportunities, whatever it might be, in whatever way lights us up.
Yeah, it's great. Go check it out. It's on reinventionrebels.com. And you can reach Wendy Battles. If you think you have a wonderful reinvention story, you can email her at reinventionrebels@gmail.com and possibly be a guest on her show.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. So much fun, Wendy. Thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you. Such an honor and pleasure to be here with you today, Wendy.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So, just want to give a shout out to the Greenville Podcast Company for their expert editing and production of the Hey Boomer podcast. So they take our live show, clean it up, make the audio just pop, and then we post it out to all of the different podcast apps. So you can find us on any of the apps that you listen to podcasts. Also, I have what's called the Vitality Assessment, and it will give you an idea of where you are on the scale of feeling completely full and vital or completely depleted, and then what you might think about doing to fill yourself back up. And certainly reinventing yourself, finding who you are meant to be, is a great way to refill yourself. So go to heyboomer.biz and download that vitality assessment, which is right there on the homepage. Also, please check out Road Scholar, our sponsor. We love to support our sponsor. So go to roadscholar.org/heyboomer and look at all the amazing trips that they have there. And next week's story. My guest next week is a woman named Doris Blumenthal. And Doris was adopted as a very young child. As an adult in her 50s, she went on a journey to try and find her birth parents. It's an amazing story, but there's more to it than that. So many of us don't understand what it's like to be an adopted child, and do you fit in or do you not fit in, and why did my parents give me up, and all of those questions. So we're going to explore that with Doris next week. So be sure and tune in for that. And I always like to leave you with the belief that you can live with passion, you can live with relevance, and you can live with courage. And remember that you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.